It's daily delivery debate time. Good to be back with Velle E. Neal III for the first time in 2025. Happy New Year, sir.
Happy New Year to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Did you have a good New Year, good holiday?
It was great. Really good time. Good Christmas. Good eating. Deep fried a turkey. It was great.
There you
So
go.
ready to rock and roll in 2025.
You are. We'll see if Minnesota teams are. You wrote a couple things recently, including one kind of a look ahead to how 2025 could be great, and some of that can frame some of what we're going to talk about here today. So yeah, maybe just kind of give me some perspective on what brought you to a lot of those things for 2025, and then I'll get into some of the things I want to talk to you about.
Well, it's weird because I was just kind of looking back because I've done this. I've done a version of this column in each of the previous 2 years, looking ahead to 2025 and who could be in for a huge year or a big moment, or he's a key player, a key coach, or a team with a lot of promise. So when I was going through that, I realized that wow, 2024 was actually a pretty cool sports year for this area, short of winning a title. I will say
Right.
that. But you
Hey,
had
the Frost one at least. The
that's
Frost
right.
one.
The Frost did win. The Frost won. The Lynx went to the finals. The Wolves went to the Final Four. The Vikings are rolling. The Wild are rolling. I was like, man, this is actually a lot of good stuff happened in 2024, and fans should be pretty fired up about 2025, especially right off the bat. You've got two teams in the Vikings and the Wild who are considered one of them among the top teams in their league, and the Vikings are playing for top dog status in the NFC this week with the primetime game at Detroit. And I was like, man, this was a good year. They're slingshotting right into 2025 with a lot of momentum, a lot of gusto, a lot of hope. I noticed I couldn't even come up with a way to mention Minnesota Twins anywhere in that. I just thought I'd be forcing it if I would use like, well, watch out for Royce Lewis. He's in for a big year.
Right.
I was like, they're all in for a big year if they stay healthy. So I just left the Twins out of it. I just stuck with the teams that have tangible evidence that they are the real deal.
Well, and it was definitely a year of unexpected success last year too, right? Like we didn't think the Wolves were going to be a Western Conference Finals team. Like we knew they were good by the middle of last season, so by the time the calendar flipped, but we didn't think the Lynx were going to be much good at all. We didn't think the Vikings were going to be much good at all. We didn't know anything about the PWHL team from Minnesota. We didn't think the Loons were going to be very good, and they won a playoff series. I mean, there's all sorts of kind of unexpected. The Wild, we didn't think the Wild was going to be very good. Like we didn't think anybody who we thought was going to be pretty mediocre ended up being pretty good last year, which kind of gives you some hope for this year coming up. However, one of the teams that was kind of like one of the only teams that kind of like matched expectations, I think, for this year was the Gopher football team. And I want to get into something you wrote about PJ Fleck and how, you see in all these teams go to the playoffs, 9-10 wins puts you in competition now for a 12-team playoff, could be 16 at some point here. Daily delivery debate question number one is something you wrote about. Is the heat on PJ Fleck to get them into playoff contention at least sometime soon?
I don't know if it's full blast heat, but it's got to be it's got to be like at least a heat warmer or some sort of seat warmer applied to him. Looking at these college football games, and I know there've been a couple blowouts, but I thought that the Texas Arizona State game was pretty wild there. That was a snoozer for 3 quarters, and then went bananas in the fourth. And I'm sitting there looking at these records, and I'm like, man, you get the double-digit wins, you got a shot at this thing. And then I went and looked up PJ's record, and I didn't realize it's been 8 years now, and he's only hit double-digit wins once. And I'm like, what should be the standards here? I know Minnesota isn't considered a top dog program. I know they don't get 5-star recruits. I was reminded in emails today about we're getting outspent in NIL, which I agree, but at the same time, good coaches coach their players up. There'll be years we can get around all that. like Indiana. Um,
Yes.
we've actually had this conversation before, Mike. What should be our standards? And I think
Yeah.
we came to the conclusion that every 2-3 years, come up with a 10-win season or 11-win season, and go to a juicy bowl game. Well, now if you win 11 games, you're in the field of 12. You
Yeah.
know, and so I just think the onus should the scrutiny should be on PJ a little bit for winning just having double digit wins just once in the last 8 years. Now, if you want to kick out the COVID year and make it
Yeah.
7 years, fine. But I just think that's too long of a stretch there without having success. And he had a chance this year. The loss of Rutgers was bad. Losing to North Carolina, who then got 70 hung on him by James Madison, was bad. He's played the moral victory card in the losses to Michigan
Right.
and State, and they got screwed over a little bit against Michigan. And the Penn State game was a battle they could have won, but PJ should be sitting on 9 wins going into this game, in my opinion. And then you win this bowl game with your favorite to win. You got a 10-win season. I just think we're not asking him to be a national champion, but we got to see more victories than what he's been producing in recent years.
You got to be in the playoff conversation at least every 3 to 5 years. I think that's fair. I think you got to maintain a certain baseline, and I think this year was kind of that baseline, right? Like 7-5 season. That can be kind of like your baseline. You don't want to go below that, and then when you have a better team, 8, 9, maybe 10 wins, and that gets you in that conversation. I think that should be the standard for a team like them. And like we've talked about, you're right. Like what this playoff does, it's in a lot of years, it's not really about Alabama or Georgia, even though Alabama didn't get in this year. Like it's not about the teams that are there every year, Oregon, Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia. It's mostly about those teams on that next tier. Like Indiana doesn't get a sniff of this in most years. They don't even get close to this in most years of their existence. In a 4-team playoff, this does not exist for a team like Minnesota or Indiana. It is the fact that it's possible now and could get expanded even more to 16 means that if you're just the 16th best team in the country, which you ought to be at various points, every 3 to 5 years, I think you're right. I think that it doesn't put them on the hot seat, but it creates a different expectation than just, hey, go to a nice bowl game every now and then. It's, hey, get into the playoff because it's there for you. It's possible.
Yeah, and all these coaches are going through the same thing. They all have 1-score games. I know PJ made a big deal about playing 7 1-score games. I'm like, okay, well, what's your record in those games? You got to convert. Injuries, NIL, schedule. Copy editor yesterday was like, "Oh, you're missing the point about the Indiana schedule is so easy." I was like, every team run, especially now with these super conferences, there are going to be teams that are going to have variable schedules that they're going to have. Schedules in which it's set up for them to have success. Take advantage of it. And Signetti did that with Indiana. And what's happened now? The recruiting's improved for next year. NIL money's coming in, and PJ needs to provide that juice. Oh, by the way, Mike, I was talking to someone who knows an NFL scout, and he asked him, have you guys seen Indiana play yet? I said, oh, yeah, we've been down there. And he was like, okay, what they got? Who are their studs? He's like, Indiana's got nothing.
Really?
So he won 11 games. And I think that their highest rated player may be drafted in the 4th round of the upcoming draft. So
just a true team.
Win.
Yeah.
You coach them up, take advantage of your schedule, get it done.
Yeah, I agree. I think the expectations will get raised as time goes on. NIL is a tricky thing to navigate, although I think some of the new rules that'll come into effect might level some of that playing field. But yeah, absolutely get into that mix at some point because it will be expected of, if you want to be a good program, you're going to need to be in that conversation.